This is the update call for Policy and Taxation Group and Family Enterprise USA. I want to welcome you to the call. Thank you for joining us today. Remind you all that this call is being recorded. I will go through the agenda quickly in a minute, but I would also remind you that you're on mute, and other than the panelists, you're not on video, and therefore if you have questions, please put it in the Q&A. We will attempt to answer those questions after each speaker. Really just depends on the time. So once again, if you have questions, put it in the Q&A. I will also remind everyone on this call that if you have not financially supported Policy and Taxation Group or Family Enterprise USA, you will not be invited to any more of these calls. We really provide this for our families that support our work. And so we have been lenient in the past, but we think it's very important that you do that. And so we're really encouraging you to go onto our websites, policyandtaxationgroup.com or familyenterpriseusa.com, and donate. You can donate online. Our next call will be May 6th, and Frank Luntz will be on that call with us, as well as Brandon and Russ. And like today, we'll probably have other speakers. So today, in addition to Frank talking to us about what we can expect in this 117th Congress, we also have Senator Mark Pryor from Arkansas. So having said that, I am now going to turn it over to Frank, who has worked with us more than 25 years and has been incredibly helpful in everything that we've done, including meeting with members of Congress and helping us to craft our language. We've done numerous polls and focus groups, and Frank, we really appreciate your support all these years. So why don't you now tell us what we can expect?
Yes, I'm going to do something I haven't done before to make this exclusive for you all, which is nobody has seen this survey except for about a dozen, maybe 24 members of Congress. And we've been talking about the results, but I'm going to show you exactly what is happening now with Trump voters, because many of you are Trump voters. And I'll do this very quickly. I'll just give you about 5 or 6 different pieces of data. We wanted to know what percentage of the Trump vote, and this was done on the 11th of January. So 2 weeks ago, it was done after the invasion of the Capitol, but before the impeachment vote. And on the 11th of January, 78% of Trump voters believe Donald Trump's claim that the election was rigged and stolen illegally. 78%. Next, we asked them, if the vote was counted accurately and fairly, 2/3, 67% believe that Trump actually did win that election. By comparison, it was less than half of this who thought that Al Gore had actually defeated George Bush in the election that Bush eventually won by 500 votes. And I got 3 more for you to see. 50% on the 11th of January. Half of Trump voters, even after the Electoral College was recognized, even after the official transition, everything had been done as it was supposed to be done. Half of Trump voters on the 11th still wanted him to contest the election. 73% believe the system is rigged and needs to be fundamentally changed. And incredibly, after all that's happened, 41% think more favorably about Donald Trump now and 24% less favorably. So let me take this off. I wanted you to see what is happening among that segment of the population, because right now it's tearing the Republican Party apart. We're doing this call with Kevin McCarthy, either having just met with or about to go in to see Donald Trump. He's getting condemned by the New York Times, by the Washington Post, by the mainstream media, that there is every attempt internally within the Republicans to try to address this, to try to keep from exploding, and quite frankly, to try to pull the Republican Party together before it's too late. But right now, almost half of the Republican caucus has said that they will vote against Liz Cheney because she voted for impeachment. And frankly, Pat, I'd love to hear when people ask questions. We're going to do this in several breaks, so we make it discussion oriented. I would like each person, when they ask their question, to tell me whether or not they would remove Liz Cheney as the conference chair for the Republican House Conference because she voted to impeach Trump, whether that's an impeachment, whether that's a removable offense for her. But here's the challenge. They've got more seats in the House than any minority party in decades. They've got a 50-50 Senate. And so there has to be power sharing, which means that every committee is going to be exactly 50-50. And thank God for that, because it means that the Democrats cannot ram stuff through. And I know that this is a nonpartisan organization, but it is now, we are so partisan in our politics, in our beliefs, so divided that there's only Joe Manchin. It's the only conservative Democrat left. And they've only got two liberal Republicans left, or moderate Republicans left, Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski. So we're going to have a very divided Congress. And I'm not convinced that the Republican Party will be unified, not just in 2022. I'm not convinced that the Republican Party is going to be unified by the time we get to 2023 and 2024. That's how deep it is. I talk to these people all the time. They're guests in my home all the time. And the level of disdain that they hold towards each other is something I've never seen in politics before. So let me stop there. Let me see if there's a question about the Republicans, and then we'll do the Democrats, and then we'll do kind of a very brief looking ahead segment. But I do want to keep this interactive. So can I answer a question from somebody?
I don't see any questions yet, Frank. While people are thinking about that, I have a question for you, which doesn't relate as much to the Republican Party as the voters in general. And you may not know this, but what do you think the percent of voters in general believe that President Trump, the election was stolen from him?
You'd have to cut it basically in half, because among Democrats, it would be literally 1%. That's it, who would think that the election was stolen from him. And Trump got about 47% of the vote. So that means that it's half of that. So 67, there may be 33%, 34% of America thinks the election was stolen. That number is so high. Pat, I'm still not over it. I'm still not over doing these focus groups. I urge you to go to my website, to go to Twitter, and you'll see some of the 2-minute and 3-minute segments where I cannot control these people anymore. They just want to yell at each other. And I urge you to see it, because I want you to see what's happened to our democracy. It's a real problem. So we do have a question from Preston Root, and we also got one from Brett Roush. Actually, we have a comment from him, and both of them say that Liz Cheney should not be removed. So I answered this one question, then we'll do the Democrats, because I know you've got other people on this call too. What is the key factor that can unite Republicans, and when is it going to take place? It cannot take place with Donald Trump still an active player. And it is amazing to me that they just did a survey about Liz Cheney in Wyoming, a survey that shows that she's lost a great deal of support, that if they had a recall on the ballot, she would lose it, that among voters overall, they're angry at her. Among Republicans, they want to take her out, that she right now will have a very hard time winning re-election. It is that strong. The Republican Party has become the party of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the personalization of the Republican Party. And so what's the key factor in uniting them? That's pretty easy. It's economic policy in general, and what Joe Biden proposes to do in economic policy in particular. Nothing unites people as swiftly and surely and for the long term as genuine anger about what the opposition is doing. And so if Joe Biden starts to propose his original tax policy, which, for example, would take capital gains up to almost the income tax rate, if he insists on doing that, if he insists on nationalizing healthcare, if he insists on removing so much of the security at the border, because he doesn't support it, doesn't agree with it. If Joe Biden stays true to his campaign promises, that will unite the Republican Party. But here's the problem. It'll also hurt the country. And frankly, I don't want to hurt one and destroy the other. And I do think, and Pat, you never heard me say this, I don't think. But I think that our democracy is in danger. I really do. And I think that we have a lower degree of support for our system of government than at any time in my lifetime. And the consequences of that are horrific. The way we talk to each other, the way we treat each other. I think we're in for an awful lot of trouble going forward. Now, I know that there are a bunch of questions, but I want to do the Democrats because I don't want to overstay my welcome. And then I'll go back to those. The Democratic Party is equally split.
Okay.
And they're not as, it may not be as public because, frankly, the New York Times does not want to highlight it. But AOC has declared war on Nancy Pelosi and the mainstream of the Democratic Party. And they are attempting, with some success, to assign people committees based on where they stand and how likely they are to be loyal to the Democrats. There is a desire among the progressives to take on the centrists in primaries that even though they did so to a great degree in 2020, they now believe that that's the key strategy for 2022. So both political parties are going to have bruising, costly, ideological primaries. And second, with the Democrats, is that they really have no consensus because the most important group in Washington right now are called the Problem Solvers Caucus. These are roughly, because some of them lost their reelection campaigns, but this is roughly 35 to 40 House Republicans, 35 to 40 House Democrats. They're increasing their numbers in the Senate. It began at 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans. They may be up to 10. But these are people who are committed to voting across the aisle. If 2/3 of them endorse a piece of legislation, they all agree to support it. By doing that, by making that pledge, it makes them much more powerful. And it says to the leadership that if you're so extreme that you've completely gone off the reservation and are offering things that will jeopardize those parties, they're not going to support it. The Problem Solvers Caucus will not support extreme left or extreme right legislation. And that is a big deal because that in itself could stop the proposed changes to Biden's tax increases. I do want to say one thing about the Democrats, which are they are less well defined, that we don't see the divisions as much, and it's much more flexible and fluid. But that's right now. And a lot of people are going to be there's going to be a lot of disappointment from a lot of people. And I think that they're going to go through the same kind of trauma that the Republicans are. And those Democrats who are progressive are willing to go to war to get what they want out of Washington. Higher taxes, higher spending, more government, more control, and they're not going away. So let me stop and I'll take another look at the Q&A. I'll do Brett's question. How does the changes to immigration due to future elections, at least 2022 and 2024? Immigration started off as an issue that helped the Republicans. It ended up as an issue who helped the Democrats, except on election day, Donald Trump actually increased his support among Latinos and Hispanics. One has to wonder if he'd not spent as much time bashing immigration policy, maybe he would have turned out 1% or 2% less of his own vote, but he would have turned out many, many percentage points from those who liked him in other areas, but did not like his commentary on immigration. I think it's going to be a lead issue, but it's only an issue among Republicans. And this is amazing to me, that even though the immigrants themselves are so much more likely to vote Democrat than Republican, the fact that they are that they're here inside our borders does not make voters angry, and that the Republicans have more to lose if they get labeled as supporting amnesty than the Democrats for removing money for the wall or for not arresting people. That the party that will be punished for a lack of immigration policy is actually the Republican Party. So a couple more findings, and then I'll turn it back to you, Pat. In terms of legislation, the number one goal for the Biden administration is to remove Donald Trump from the face of the earth, to remove his influence, to remove his opinions. I am not at all surprised about what happened with and Mark Pryor. You look great. I'm not sure about the shirt that you chose, but it's great to see you. The last time I was on this call, I only heard your voice. I didn't get to see you. The goal of Trump, the goal of Biden, is to remove every executive order possible. And you notice that Biden is signing 5 one day, 7 one day, 6 one day. Their goal is to get rid of 60% of the executive orders that Trump had signed within the first 100 days, get up to over 85% within the first 6 months, and they estimate that they're going to attempt to overturn about 95%. 5% of Trump's executive orders will be allowed to stand, but the other 95% they want gone. And I think they'll be successful within the first year. And second, because the Senate is so evenly divided and because they don't want to test Joe Manchin, I believe that Biden himself will work with the Republicans if the Republicans give him some victories. And this is a very interesting strategy. Do you shut them out? Do you shut out and prevent the Democrats from getting any legislation, keeping it at a 60-point threshold, 60 vote threshold, which is the filibuster threshold, to make it impossible for them to pass anything? Or do you say, you know what? Let's give him a few victories, because if we do it this way, Manchin says he'll stay with us on the filibuster rule, and we won't have this insane left-wing policy agenda forced down their throats by a change from 60 votes to 50 votes plus one for the filibuster. I think that this year is going to be one that angers Republicans because they're not used to someone in the White House dictating policy to them. And it's going to anger some progressive Democrats because they'll feel like they haven't gone far enough. I just think we're going to be kind of angry and disappointed by the time the year is up. And in terms of this issue, because I know, Pat, you would always say to me, what about us? I don't know how you stop the repeal. I think that your effort right now is to ensure that they don't target you for tax increases. And so this Problem Solvers Caucus and the New Labels organization should be your number one target, because all you need is a few of those guys there to say, I won't increase spending. I won't increase taxes. And then that effort to raise the death tax will fail. I would focus on the Republicans in that organization because they're most likely to break ranks. And I would focus on the Democrats in that organization because at least they'll give you a willing ear. At least they'll hear what you have to say. And at this point, all you need is 3 or 4 of them. And then any kind of tax increase will be derailed. And so with that, I'll take a look and see if there's anything in the chat. I see we got 2 comments.
Yeah, look in the chat because Dan has got a question in the chat.
From Russ. Was Rob Portman's retirement related to Trump's continued power among Republicans? The answer is he hated it. And he and I had a conversation. You all were very helpful to me. And I would have been helpful to you if Donald Trump hadn't screwed up Georgia. We were going to win Georgia by 4 points. We were going to win both those Senate seats. And Trump complained and complained and complained without any evidence whatsoever that the election was rigged. And 200,000 Republicans who voted for president did not vote in the Georgia Senate elections. And that's what killed us. We always turned out more people, not this time. And after the election was over, I was invited to do a presentation before the Senate. And Rob Portman was there, and I sat next to him. And everything he said to me, I said to him, actually, you don't sound like you're running for re-election. He said, and I had not made up my mind yet. And I said, I'll tell you, I've known you forever. This is not someone who's going to seek re-election. Will you see more of those? Yes, I'm sure of it. And the next one to watch, because Ohio's pretty good, is to watch. You've already lost Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania, and that state's been trending Democrat. And the next one to watch is Ron Johnson in Wisconsin. If you get all three of them retiring, Pat, the Senate's going to shift over to the Democrats even further.
Yeah.
And then one more from Daniel Vander. You have to tell me because the name gets cut off. Daniel, you should have had a shorter
Yeah,
name.
it's Dan who works with us from, yeah.
Oh.
He goes, just call him Dan. He works with us from Cornell, the Smith Family Business Center there. He's been a great help.
Okay, if you'd just been Dan instead of Daniel, this would have worked out fine. So it's really not our fault. I agree that there's division in the Republican Party, but just over a year ago, could you not argue that the Democratic Party was equally divided between the Bernie AOC caucus and the moderates? Yes, you could. And that's why all politics is fleeting. And this could change significantly. The difference is that we've never had a group of people that are prepared to do what conservatives claim progressives do all the time, which is riot. The coolest thing for me is that I took a photograph of a woman walking up Pennsylvania Avenue. Walking up. Yes, it was Pennsylvania. And the Capitol's in the background, and the sign says, "Unlike liberals, we Trump voters don't riot." Well, of course, we know that they do. And it's a great photograph. I will send it to you. PBS asked for it. I don't know if they used it in the most recent special that they ran. But we've never had a situation where those on the right were prepared to get that violent to storm the Capitol. And for all of you who are really mad about Black Lives Matter, I just say to you, if this had been the Democrats trying to break into the Capitol, you know what you would say, and you know what you would do. And I think we have to hold everybody accountable for how they behaved that day, because it truly was such an embarrassment. Okay, finally, Frank, from your point of view, at least you know my first name, whom do you believe, and it's not whom do you believe can pull the Republican Party together for 2024? And that question comes from David Friedman. I'll be watching Chris Christie. I'll be watching Ben Sass. I will be watching Christy Noem, who's been a very strong supporter of this group, because all of them have potential, as does Marco Rubio. I don't know who I put in the lead, but I'll tell you this. If Tim Scott runs, that's a game changer. If he could ever get the nomination, that's a life changer for the country and for the party and for the issue itself. If you want to support someone who won't draw the usual ire of the left and people will give him a hearing, Tim Scott's probably the number one person for that. And that's the person who I'm going to be watching. So Pat, I think I should give it over to you because I've gone for 29 minutes. And I know the senator's waiting to go on. But I want you, it's very hard for me not to give up. And it's very hard for me not to be cynical at this point. And do check out those focus groups. It's at Frank Luntz. But you can't give up. And I'll end with something that I've developed over the last 48 hours. Pat knows that I seek to do things that are significant in life. And I don't mean successful necessarily, though I want them to be, but things that will have an impact and really help people. Uh, I want to do something on education that's very similar to the Giving Pledge. Just as people agree to give more than half of their income to charity rather than their children, I think that we need to have some sort of effort that every person who is blessed with a kind of income that cares about the death tax, that they agree while they're alive to give 1 day a month to teaching. Imagine the impact of having role models in the classrooms, or maybe financially supporting the school, whatever the school needs, whatever the student needs, that we should get it for them. Because right now the government's not doing it. Right now public schools are not working. In fact, it's a disaster right now. And I don't see any changes because they cannot change the system. The system won't let itself be changed. So I've come up with an idea, which is each one, teach one. Each person, essentially, if you got a savings of, I don't know, 50 million or more, each of you agree to adopt a school. And you agree to do so for 3 years. So you take the 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, and they all go through the same process. I don't believe any of you will stop because you'll love it so much. But each one, teach one, is a way for us to make a meaningful, measurable, fundamental difference in the future of our country. And in the end, if we're successful, but our country's gone to hell, if we found a way to shelter our income, but the average American can't shelter away from ignorance or lack of knowledge, it won't mean nearly as much to us. Even if I have a good year, I don't feel good about it if the country's not in good shape. So keep that in mind. What can you do to make a difference? I'll be there for you, and I'll do everything I can to save the change in rate and the change in deduction, and so that you get to keep more of your hard-earned money. Please do me a favor and do something for the next generation of Americans. You'll be prouder of that than anything else you do in life. Pat, I'll give it back to you.
So I thank you for that. And Frank, I absolutely agree with you. Our education system, as everybody knows, is broken. And we have such incredibly talented and knowledgeable people associated with both of our organizations that I think it's a challenge to all of them. Certainly I do mentoring. I help some students as well. And I think that's really, really important for us all to do. So I think that's a great challenge. I appreciate that. And I really appreciate your time today. I know it's very late where you are, and you've probably had very little sleep as usual. So once again, thanks for joining the call, and now go get some sleep.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks, Frank. Bye. Now I want to turn it over to Russ Sullivan. Russ Sullivan is going to introduce our next speaker, who we're very fortunate to have, Senator Mark Pryor from Arkansas. And I believe we have some families from Arkansas on the phone. So we're very pleased to have him on the phone with us today. So Russ, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Pat. Let me introduce to you my friend and colleague at Brownstein, Senator Mark Pryor. Like me, he grew up in Arkansas, although he lived in Washington, D.C. a bit, as his father was a senator as well. He served in the Arkansas House of Representatives, was elected at a very young age to statewide office as the Attorney General, and then elected to the United States Senate, and was reelected and served 2 terms there. Passed a number of bills during his tenure, particularly in the area of consumer protection. He's always had a strong emphasis on protecting children, and so we're very pleased to have him here today. Senator Pryor understands the tension that Democrats are going to face this Congress. He was representing a state that was more red than blue. He understands when he faces issues like the Affordable Care Act, which he voted for, but most of the state of Arkansas at the time was opposed. Now that most of them support it now, but they didn't back then. So he understands the tension between representing your constituents and also voting to keep the government running and working with the Democratic majority. So he's built a great practice already at Brownstein, and I'm honored to have him here today to tell you who Joe Biden is, because he worked with him, and what we might see this Congress. Senator?
Thank you, Russ, and thank you all for having me today. It's great to be with you again, and I do want to know all the people from Arkansas, but we can talk about that in a few minutes. Yeah, I thought what I might do today is just keep my remarks very short, open the line for questions and answers. So go ahead and submit those when you're ready. But I thought I'd begin just by talking about, the biggest political story of the year, which is Joe Biden, and talk about a little bit about my experiences with him, and like as Russ said, sort of the stresses of working in a 50-50 Senate, and just the stresses of working in this political environment that we find ourselves today. My view of Joe Biden is that he wants to be bipartisan. I think that President Biden will, as a general rule, work with anybody who's willing to work with him. And I think he'll kind of go the extra mile to try to do that. But once it's clear that certain individual congressmen or senators or governors, whatever it happens to be, will not work with him, he'll move on, and he'll try to find the ones who will work with him and who will find common ground with him. And I say that because, Biden spent 36 years in the Senate, and then 8 years as vice president, which is a total of 44 years in public service and being around the Senate. And, one thing about the Senate, regardless of your points of view, your political philosophy, the things you want to accomplish, regardless of any of that, to be an effective senator, the first thing you have to know how to do is count, right? And he can count in the Senate right now, and it's 50-50. And if he sends the vice president over there, it's 51-50. So he knows that he doesn't have any margin there. And he knows, just as a practical matter, if he wants to get anything done, he needs Republican votes. So I think he's wired that way anyway. But secondly, I think he'll want to do it just, pragmatically. But also, I think Joe Biden is that former senator who would get down there on the floor and fight with his colleagues on different issues. And as soon as the vote was taken, he'd go over there and shake hands and say, look, we talked about this bill that you're working on. I'll co-sponsor that with you. Let's file it next week. I mean, that's Joe Biden. And that's how that's how the Senate worked for most of his time there. I think that's how he wants to see the Senate and the Congress work again. So, we'll see what happens. Personally, and the other thing about him is there's a lot of discussion about reconciliation. He's been through a lot of those during his time in the Senate, so he knows how to do it. He also knows how hard it is. He knows it's nearly impossible with the 50-50 because you cannot lose a vote. But, I think that that's on the table. They're going to try to see what they can put together under reconciliation. I have no idea what's going to be in the package or out of the package, but nonetheless, I think they will give it a try, but there's no guarantees that they're going to be successful on any of that. Now, just my personal view of his job performance so far, 2 weeks in or whatever it happens to be, a week and a half in, I feel like that he's done a pretty good job of trying to stay center left and not go far left. And I know that he made a lot of the left very unhappy with a lot of his picks for the cabinet and for other positions. Me personally, there's some of those I probably wouldn't have chosen, but still, regardless, I think he, as we know, he disappointed the folks on the left on a number of these picks. And I think that kind of shows his commitment to try to find common ground, to try to, govern. In fact, I think that Biden, from my standpoint, has a very clear mandate. It's not a political mandate like, he wants to move everything, over to one side or the other, or he's going to pass X number of pieces of legislation. I don't think that's his mandate at all. I think what his mandate is, honestly, is to be an adult and to be presidential, maybe to not tweet. I think his mandate is maybe to be a little boring. And his mandate, I think, is just to govern. I think that's what people voted for. I think that there were a lot of people that obviously liked some of the things that Trump did. There are a lot of people that actually liked Trump's behavior and things like that, because how it was. You just know how it was. But there were a lot more people who wanted to see a change there, and they wanted to kind of get back to a president like what we're used to, someone who has this kind of inherent leadership quality and this sort of soothing demeanor, and someone who's presidential, who treats people with respect, maybe will restore some good relations with allies, and who will try to work with the other side, won't demonize people, things like that. So I think that's really what people voted for when they voted for Joe Biden. And of course, part of the package of Joe Biden is you get a center-left person. In fact, I think if Joe Biden were left to his own devices and he had a 60 vote majority in the Senate, I mean, he might be pushing some things to the left. But I just think as a practical matter, again, because you have to do math to be in the Senate, he's about as far left as he can be under the circumstances right now. So I know y'all probably want to talk about taxes. I think that you're going to have a number of Democrats that do feel that squeeze, as Russ talked about, and how they understand, believe me, they understand how important you are and your companies are in your communities, which is the same thing as saying in their communities, because they have people like you in their communities as well, even if they're not in your group. And he knows how important that is. He saw it all of his life in Delaware. He represented people like that all over Delaware and all over the country. So I think that there's going to be a lot of Democrats who will listen to you and have an open door. I think right now, given the fact that COVID is really on everyone's mind, I think it's a little hard to go in and ask for tax reduction right now. I think actually you've got COVID. I think you've got the 2017 tax law that passed. And also, I think you have a $3 trillion deficit last year. So I'm not saying you shouldn't ask, because a lot of people will ask. I think you need to go in and make your point and visit. But I do think it's important this year for your membership to manage expectations. I think, again, I don't think there'll be a number of Democrats, and Russ knows all these offices and all these people. And he's a great guide here on who will absolutely not slam the door in your face and will actually want to know more. And we'll maybe try to get there with you, at least to some degree. But I do think 2021, at least the first part of 2021, is going to be pretty difficult. I do think also what Frank, who, by the way, I've always liked Frank Lutz. He's been never really like a friend of mine, but I've had a number of conversations with Frank Lutz and always enjoyed it. I think he's super smart. He really understands politics. And I think he does have a great heart. When he said at the end about wanting to do something and give back, I think that's very genuine for him, as you all know. But I think he's right. I think that Biden is very committed to reversing a lot of the things that Trump did. And that's, in some ways that's common. In some ways that's real specific to Trump. So with that, let me open the floor for questions. I'm glad to answer any questions anyone has. So just go ahead and.
All right, Senator.
Yes, sir.
Starting to come in, but I'm going to throw first one.
Go ahead.
Is Biden more like Obama or Clinton? He served with Obama, but some would say he's more of a deal maker, like Clinton is, and maybe less policy principled like Obama was. What do you think?
I agree with that. I think he's less policy principled. I think that Obama, as much as I love him, was a little bit of a purist on some issues and just wouldn't bend. The other thing about President Obama, which I did not like because I was there his first 6 years as president, is when Obama got attacked, and some of the attacks were pretty rough, you know, in his first term and all that. But when he got attacked, he sort of picked up his ball and went home, and he didn't engage with the Congress as much as I wish he had. One thing about Bill Clinton, he was tenacious about continuing to engage with the House and Senate Democrats and Republicans, even during his impeachment. You know, he very focused on that. I think Biden will have that same quality. I think he'll keep going back and keep going back. And actually, I think that's what people want. I think they want us to govern. I think they want Washington to work. And I feel like Biden's pretty committed to that.
Okay, I'm not sure whether your dog agrees with you or not. But the next question is,
That's why I muted it.
do you think Democratic leaders are baiting conservatives into violence?
No, I don't think that. I don't think that at all. I was sickened by what I saw on January 6th. I think the rest of the nation was as well. I've had one person in particular who I don't even really know call me in Arkansas to try to justify all of that violence, and I can't justify it in my mind. No, I don't think the Democrats are trying to bait anybody into anything. I think that we need to put all that stuff aside, and you know, we need to move forward. And I don't know what the consequences are for President Trump. I mean, I think there should be some accountability, some consequence. I'm not saying I have the answer on that. But you know, we are with that and with the impeachment, and we'll let them sort that out. But I think the main thing is we need to focus on governing right now.
All right, Senator, next question. Can you give us a timeline of what is likely for reconciliation? One bill by summer? How many times can they do reconciliation in 2021?
They can do it legally 3 times. I think it's really hard to do 3. I think it's hard to do 1, but you can break them up into smaller packages and do 3. I've forgotten exactly right now what the 3 would have to be. They have to be limited on topics. But anyway, regardless, I think they'll do 1, maybe 2. Again, you don't have any votes to play with here. Let me say this as just a quick history lesson. You know, the Bush tax cuts were done through reconciliation. Part of Obamacare was done through reconciliation, and the Trump tax cuts were done through reconciliation. So the Congress has used it, both parties have used it as a way to get their agenda done previously. So I think this Congress will try. Whether they're successful, I don't know.
All right, next Pat.
Yeah, go ahead, Pat.
Okay, Russ. So, hi, Senator Pryor. So I've had the fortunate, I guess, experience to work on the estate tax for almost over 2 decades now. And on this phone, you have 2 organizations. Family Enterprise USA represents family businesses in the United States. And of course, one of their top issues is the estate tax. Other issues like income tax, capital gains, too much regulation. In addition, Policy and Taxation Group, which is sole purpose is reform, repeal of gift, estate, and generation skipping tax. And you can see why they're sister organizations,
Right.
Because the estate tax is so important to family.
Right.
So I was around as Russ was around back in 1999 when we had the chance to repeal the tax, and 10 Senate Democrats actually supported repeal. And we had that vote, and I recall, and I'll put you on the spot here, that you voted against that repeal, even though you had thought until you were ready to vote that you were going to support it. And so my question is really, not to go back in history, but based on what you've learned about the tax today, would you support a rate reduction in the rate of tax from the 40% to that of capital gains? And if so, why?
Well, let me back up here for a sec. If that vote was in 99, I wasn't in the Senate in 99. I came in 03. So
I may have the date.
Yeah, it's okay. But yeah, so I think that again, I think it's when you have a $3 trillion deficit and you've got COVID going on, and understanding that the membership here got for the most part, a pretty healthy tax cut just 4 years ago. I think it's the timing is not great to come in and ask for a reduction. But I'm not saying that you won't get some friendly ears in the Congress on the Democratic side. I think you probably will. But I think that the estate tax is not going to be, close to the top priority for the Senate Democrats or even the House Democrats. So I think you're going to have folks like Russ who will be working this throughout the year for you. And he's going to have to pick his spots. Everybody's going to have to pick their spots on when to go in, when to push, who to meet with, how to do it. And, my guess is it's about expectations this year. My guess is it probably won't happen this year, and I could be dead wrong, and y'all could prove me wrong. And, Russ may tell me at some point this year that he was able to pull it off. And if he does, more power to him. But I think the timing is a little bit difficult right now.
All right, one more question.
Okay,
Senator, how does Biden demonstrate bipartisanship and still support business owners with a $15 minimum wage increase and with the appointment of the Department of Labor with Marty Walsh, a former union leader who will look to strengthen unions? Is it possible to do all that?
Well, yes. I mean, here's the deal. It could be that Joe Biden could be the last, kind of real union Democrat that we have as president. He grew up in the union world in Pennsylvania and then later in Delaware. Whereas in Arkansas, we're a right to work state, and we don't have a huge union presence in this state. As it turns out, a lot of Democrats don't in their home states. So it's going to be interesting to see, what the next 2 or 3 Democratic presidents look like in terms of their union presence. But obviously the unions are a traditional anchor of the Democratic Party. So it is true that Biden has put a very pro-union team over there at the Department of Labor, no doubt about it. This is one of the issues I had when President Obama was there is, President Bush had been pretty much anti-union, and President Obama comes in as very pro-union. And that's not really good for anybody. I don't like these big swings around labor issues, but anyway, that's just where it is. So I do think you're right, Russ. I think that when a Democratic president cozies up to the labor unions, it's something that's very hard for business to overlook, because I think a lot of companies in this country, they're pro-worker, but they're just not pro-union, and they want an educated workforce. They want a great workforce. They want to treat the workforce correctly, but they don't want unions. So I think it puts a strain between Biden and the business community. But you overcome that. You overcome that in other ways. You pick other issues. You find areas you can work on with the business community, and there's a lot of those. And I think Biden will try to do that.
All right. Thank you, Senator, for joining us today. We appreciate it very much.
You bet. Thank you,
very
Russ.
much.
Thank you for everybody.
Appreciate your time.
Appreciate it.
All right,
welcome.
Pat,
Take
back
care.
to you.
Okay, thanks, Russ. So in the last few remaining minutes, I want Brandon Ramon of Squire Patton Boggs, as well as Russ Sullivan, to give us their take on what they envision in the 117th session of Congress. And I know we have a short amount of time, but we had this discussion with the board yesterday. We have a political legislative plan that we've put together if anyone's interested in seeing it other than the board. And so I'll let the two of you talk about that plan and what our plans are for this session.
All right, so I'll start.
So Russ,
I'll start and frame this, and Brandon can speak on one issue and I'll speak on the other. So we really, with respect to the estate tax, we sort of have 2 initiatives that we must pursue. Frank Luntz talked about getting in and talking to the moderates, Republicans and Democrats, to try to get them on our side, particularly to prevent something bad from happening in the tax or other laws related to us. And so we think that the best way to do that is not only to promote our legislation to reduce the estate tax down to capital gains levels, but also we've got to try to lock in some champions who will prevent the increase in tax that inevitably is at least going to be considered. So Brandon's going to talk briefly about the former, and I'll talk about the latter.
Thanks, Russ. And hello, everybody. Glad to be with you. So everyone's already familiar with the rate reduction bill. It was introduced now 2 separate Congresses in the Senate, and then last Congress for the first time in the House by Congressman Arrington. As Russ mentioned, in terms of the bipartisan support, especially given the narrower margins that we have this year, I'm really trying to build out a bipartisan support for the bill because I think that positions us best for success there. So in the House, Congressman Arrington has revised the bill. The legislative text is ready to go and to be introduced when we kind of give the thumbs up. So we've been working very closely with Congressman Cuellar. We've had a couple members engage with him as well from the organization, and we appreciate the support. And again, I'll just give a shout out to any members here who have a relationship with the congressman that would like to reach out to him. Feel free to reach out to me and I can give you the contact information of the staffer. But hopefully we'll get a confirmation from him within the next week or so we can get that bill introduced. Just really quickly in terms of timing, we are trying to get this out before the state tax repeal bill is introduced. That's likely going to be sometime next month or in March. They're building out the co-sponsors and want to kind of let things settle down around impeachment and other big items so they can get some news attention on it. On the Senate side, we're also coordinating with Senator Cotton and the same group of folks from last year. With Russ, we're working on Senator Sinema, Manchin, Warnock, as well as Kelly and Hickenlooper, who are some additional freshman senators this year that could potentially be helpful. I'll just say a couple of other things. We are going to also be working with some organizations. So you'll remember that we are members of the Family Business Estate Tax Coalition, which is a large group of different organizations supporting repeal of the estate tax, including the Farm Bureau, the NFIB, the cattlemen and contractors and Chamber of Commerce and others. And so we'll be reaching out strategically, Russ, myself, Pat, and Aubrey, to request that they, on an individual basis, join us in supporting on a letter of support, either as a group or individually, the legislation, so that when we go to build out our co-sponsor list, we can point easily to this to say these are the groups that support it, which is always helpful in getting members to sign on. And then lastly, since we're short on time, I'll just be quick. In addition to that, we're also going to be looking at trying to get data to support us. Russ can talk a little bit about this more in terms of the FEUSA and EY study and the being defensive, but also looking at some of the work that you're doing philanthropically, the jobs that would be impacted and whatnot in terms of a tangible impact within various states and congressional districts to encourage, again, both Democrats and Republicans to sign on. So Russ, I'll turn it to you for the defensive side.
Okay, the defensive side has 2 components. One is legislative and one is regulatory. On the legislative side, we've got to get a couple of those senators that Brandon mentioned. 5 we've identified. We hope we find others, but we're at least going to go after those 5 to try to get them to commit to oppose any increase in the estate tax. We're going to do that by trying to get them to sign on to our rate reduction bill. But if we're unsuccessful there, we'll still try to convince them to say no when Democrats try to craft tax increases that would hit family-owned businesses. The second area is regulatory. In other words, now Biden has the pen with respect to tax regulations. And while we don't expect him to do as much in the tax area as he will in the environmental and immigration area, for example, he still is likely to change some of the policies that were in effect during the Trump administration. So we talk about family valuation discounts. He could very well go back to the proposed rule from the Obama era. And so we're devising a strategy to go in early to the Treasury Department and to the White House and other places if we need to get influence on them not to do that, and to make sure they're not coming up with something else that would be adverse in the estate and gift tax arena. So those will be our 2 primary defensive efforts for this year.
So I would, in conclusion, I'd just like to get you to all understand, as both Brandon and Russ just said, that part of this rate reduction bill is a defensive measure. It's also important to keep talking about rate reduction because, as we've learned over 25 years, you never know when legislation is going to happen. The last 3 times there's been a state tax legislation, it's been in December at the 11th hour. So you really need to be talking about it all the time to make sure that we're in the room, and that's the discussion is around rate reduction as well as maintaining the current exemption and that we have, the current law that we have right now, and making it permanent. So in addition, Family Enterprise USA has recently just completed, as of yesterday, a study that talks about the number of family businesses in America, the jobs they create, and the GDP that they generate, which hasn't been done since 2003. The reason that's important is because legislators want to help family businesses, but they want to know what is the economic impact of those businesses on America. So now we have that. We're also going into the field with our annual survey of family businesses. It should be in a week or so. When you get it, please answer it. Again, legislators really, really want to hear and see this information. So once again, please support our work. Please go to either website and support what we do, Family Enterprise USA, as you can see on the screen, or Policy and Taxation Group. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Russ and Brandon, thank you for being on the call today. Thank you for all your hard work. You're 2 great individuals to work with. Really appreciate it. And I hope you all have a great rest of your week, and we'll be in touch. Take care. Bye-bye.